So I'm just following up on my video, another summer of motorcycle crashes. Thank you so much for all your comments, and interestingly, some bikers didn't like it, with quite a few thumbs down on this one. But let's have a look at things in a little bit more detail. Hello there and welcome. So here we are, the 16th of October, mid-autumn, quite breezy today, and a temperature of 18 degrees with expected highs of 21. Quite interesting, as some 37 years ago on this day we were waking up to the after effects of the Great Storm of 87 in southern England, which I remember well. But anyway, just going to look back on that video that I did, a summer of motorcycle crashes, and it seems that by and large my main amount of viewers did agree with a lot with what I've said, but there were a couple of people who didn't agree, as expected, and that's fine, of course, like your opinions all the time. One particular viewer noted that so I'm blaming motorcyclists for their crashes. Not his exact words, but a précis of. No, absolutely not. You've got to ask yourself the question, why would someone in my job, who's been biking for 40 years and training for 14, why would I ever want to blame a motorcyclist for something that wasn't their fault? And in fact, why do I want to blame a motorcyclist anyway, especially when the very worst thing has happened to them? But I think here's the thing. If you're going to enjoy your motorcycles, if you're going to have fun, and if you're going to live to a ripe old age and still be riding your bike like the gentleman I met a few years ago, pulling up on his lovely old Airhead BMW at the age of 85 and still riding, you've got to make sure you get a few things right and don't throw it away. So I did a bit of research following that video on motorcycle crash statistics, because as an instructor it's all very well thinking, well, what causes bike crashes? Let's make sure we try and teach those things so we can solve those problems for future riders, returning riders, or riders that are just doing extra training. You know, you want to tick all those boxes, not a phrase I like, but you know, get the sentiment I mean there. You want to make sure that when people are coming to you for training, you're giving them the best fighting chance possible, that they're going to know the danger areas and try and eliminate that as much as possible. So I thought I'll have a little look at some of the statistics. So I am going to share some of those statistics with you in a moment. It's important to note that with motorcycle crash statistics, or any road casualty statistics in the UK, the only ones I would suggest which are highly accurate are sadly fatal collisions, because they're the ones that have been investigated by a crash investigating unit forensically, and they're going to give you the best possible chance of knowing exactly what happened. And also some of the serious injury collisions will also fit into that category. Now the remainder of collisions, so there may be relatively serious injury but may not be fully investigated by forensic collision investigation, and other collisions where the police attend, it's going to be the opinion of the officer at the scene, and that officer might have 20 years experience and he might have 20 months experience. So what you're going to see on that crash card with the statistics is not necessarily going to be a true and accurate representation of what actually happened, and this is borne out by what the Department of Transport say on their website themselves as well. So it's difficult to go through those statistics with a view to saying conclusively, well, if bikers do this they'll crash, if bikers don't do that they'll be okay. But we do certainly get a flavour of what's going on, and what I've noticed is the flavour is pretty much the same as I've always believed and always known for many years. So let's have a quick look at some of the main points of some of these statistics. So there's an interesting fact sheet on the internet from the Department of Transport, and it was published in 2022. So the good news would seem to be that between 2004 and 2022, fatal motorcycle collisions were down 40% and serious were down 35%. However, over that period, motorcycle traffic was also down by 10%. The bad news, of course, is that that's still, on average, 6 fatal and 104 serious injuries to motorcyclists every week in the UK. So who are mainly at risk of being involved in these serious or fatal motorcycle collisions? Well, the stats tell us that 58% of fatal collisions did not occur at or within 20 metres of a junction. Of course, that still leaves a very high percentage that did occur at a junction, and we'll talk more about that later. 39% of those fatalities involve 2 vehicles, usually a car, and 66% of them occurred on rural roads. It'll be no surprise that 92% of those casualties were male. As regards age ranges, the top of the age range are the 30 to 39 age, with 18%. The next is the 50 to 59 age group, followed by the 20 to 24s at 13%. Jointly sharing 12% of those casualties are the age groups 16 to 19, 25 to 29 and 40 to 49. The other thing to look at here as well is what time do these collisions happen? So statistics tend to show that on weekdays they're occurring at rush hour peak times. So in other words, approximately between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning and around about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, afternoon. Now this changes at weekends. It tends to be sort of around about midday is the peak and into the early afternoon, and that's higher on Sundays. So those time of day statistics tend to suggest that maybe at weekends it's the rider that's riding for fun, for pleasure, and we've often seen it, and I remember it myself from back in the day. Those peak times, normally people out having a good time and getting things very wrong. Weekdays, rush hour, particularly in the morning, people are in a hurry, people are maybe not fully awake, especially in winter, road surface can be poor, and the light will be less at both ends of the day during rush hour. So there's probably a number of factors there that contribute to these collisions that we need to be aware of. So a very nice person at the Department of Transport very kindly sent me specifically 2022 statistics for fatal or seriously injured collisions, what we used to call KSIs. And I looked at some of the statistics for those as to what was the highest reason, if you like, for these collisions. So the top 3 overtakes, they were responsible for 663. So a normal offside overtake was 541, a near side overtake 122, and overtaking static vehicles was 173. This was followed by collisions on bends, 390 on right-handers and 452 on left-handers, so that gives you a total of 842. And the other highest statistic recorded was recorded as 3,700. That was going ahead other. So it doesn't tell us specifically what was going on there, but it wasn't on a bend and it wasn't overtaking, it was some other general manoeuvre. So when you think in 2022, 350 bikers died, 5,618 were seriously injured, and 10,975 were slightly injured. So the question is, what can we do to reduce these? So although they are the main points in those statistics, there's a lot of others, as you will see if you do a little bit of research. I've been recently reading various paperwork, even some from the Institute of Advanced Motorists. You know, we're still going on about Vision Zero, we want 0 road casualties, and we're looking very much at how we change road networks, we reduce speed limits, and we're talking about graduated licence schemes for younger car drivers. But I think one thing that time and time again that is not being addressed in any talk by any organisation about reducing road statistics is improving and heightening the level of training and the ongoing support to road users. Because it's still very much the culture of when you've got your licence, nobody wants to do anything else, no one wants to be forced to go to any other training, any other testing, it's not necessary. Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, this is where the problem is. Because the basic test is such a basic test and there's so much more to learn, We're just not getting that through to people, and constant engineering roads and constant legislation is not going to work to reduce casualty statistics. So as bikers then, what do you need to be really working on and really thinking about to reduce your chances of being involved in something nasty? Well, the other thing to bear in mind with the statistics and what turns into a nasty accident and what turns into something minor or something that's not even reported, I would suggest, is luck, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. For example, the poor lad who was out on his bike that I heard about a couple of years ago, left-hand bend, the oncoming driver saw him look down, he crossed the centre white line, collided, and the result was fatal. Okay, so he didn't do anything particularly dramatically awful, you might argue. However, it resulted in a loss of life. Now, had that car not been coming, he'd have looked down, crossed the white line, realised his mistake and come back to the correct side of the road. It wouldn't have even been an incident. It wouldn't have been reported. So it's another reason why statistics are very difficult to say truly this particular manoeuvre will cost you dearly. So we have to look at all aspects of our riding when trying to reduce statistics and risk. But we know bends are a big problem for motorcyclists, and there's several reasons for that. You don't get a lot of training about bends when you're doing your licence. You just don't. I've even done a CBT, and when I was instructing the guy on how to go around the corner, he was a renewal, and he said to me, "Oh, that was really helpful." He said, "No one ever taught me how to go around a corner." I mean, how bizarre is it that you can do a basic training course and nobody bothers to teach you how to corner? I mean, interestingly, it's not in the syllabus, which is even more bizarre, but you'd like to think a responsible instructor would at least make the effort to make sure people can go around corners rather than leaving them to their own devices. Now, the problem with cornering is, particularly with new riders, everyone has got their limits as to how far they will lean the bike. And if you go faster and faster and don't lean the bike, then it's not going to make the bend. If you don't know how to counter steer, you may struggle to get the bike to corner as promptly as it needs to. And if you get into a bend too fast and you haven't been trained how to deal with that, then if you start jamming on brakes, panicking, target fixating, then the bike will lose control. If you lean too much on the inappropriate road surface, the tyres will let go and the bike will slide out. It's like on these roads here, they're full of debris, so I've got to keep the bike more upright and shift a little bit more body weight to enable me to turn the machine. I need to be ultra smooth, and I need to avoid braking except in the most gentle of circumstances or where the road surface is a little bit better. I have to position correctly, primarily for my safety and also for my stability. If you're not taught these things, how do you know? The other major problem we seem to have with bends is what speed do you enter a bend at? Now, that's a judgment call by and large, but if you don't know how to limit point assess, which is the good starting point for what speed you should or could potentially use in a bend, there are other factors of course, you're always going to be guessing what the correct speed for a bend is, and when you're in that bend and it's tightening, it gets pretty uncomfortable. So that's probably why bends feature so highly in our crash statistics, and sad to say it, very often would see that on a Sunday afternoon back in the day with the lads out on their sports bikes having a bit of fun and just failed to negotiate a bend. So the other thing that you heard there was that quite a high percentage of these fatal and serious collisions did not occur at or within 20 metres of a junction. Well, quite a high percentage also did occur. We often hear that motorcyclists say the reason for that is car drivers are pulling out on them. Yeah, you're right. That does absolutely feature in junction collisions. Now, junctions are something that are hit normally really hard in training, both CBT and direct access. They're absolute bread and butter. And you'll probably, if you recall back to your direct access and your CBT, you went round junction after junction after junction. And the reason is they're complex. And when we talk about junctions, it's not just necessarily a traditional road junction. When I'm looking at these statistics, I'm looking at roundabouts, I'm looking at private drives, little farm entrances. In other words, anywhere another road user can join your path, or your path will join another road user's. It's where people can very easily come into conflict. The absolute top contribution to collisions, these collisions apparently, is driver or rider failed to look properly. And the second biggest contributor is driver or rider failed to judge other person's speed or path properly. So when you think about junctions, there's every chance that that's where it's going to go wrong, because of the judgment involved, or the lack of judgment involved. Motorcyclists often don't help themselves. Sorry to say it, but it's true. And they don't help themselves where junctions are concerned for two reasons. Number one, they do not position in a way that enables them to see the junction and what's going on in it, and they don't position themselves in a way that other road users may get the opportunity to see them more clearly. And secondly, it's about the level of speed used around the hazard of a junction. It's a bit of a judgment call really, but it needs to be that it's appropriate. It's like there, that van hiding, you know, can I brake, can I use a horn warning? There's no point just tearing across the junction at 30 and a 30 limit, because that's what the speed limit is, because if that van starts emerging carelessly, I've got nowhere to go and nothing to do other than to hit it, even if I do lose some speed at the last moment. You know, I've done videos before about junctions and how you should deal with those. It's personal choice, of course. But the one big thing you need to be aware of is that other drivers physically sometimes cannot see you, or see you easily or clearly, and if that's a likelihood, your speed has to be down. Junctions on bends, done a video about that in the past. If you go around a bend at some ridiculously high speed and there's a junction round it, how do you really expect a driver trying to emerge to be able to deal with you? Come round a bit slower so you both have time to see one another and respond to one another. It's much better that way. So your observational skills as regards junctions, anywhere where someone could emerge or you are going to emerge from or into, take your time, pace yourself, make sure you don't put your bike where your eyes haven't been first. Make sure you can stop in the distance you can see to be clear. Make sure your position and your speed is such that other road users can see you and can sensibly respond to you. Don't make your life hard, basically. It's always worth considering as well, if you look at the sun, obviously as we're getting through autumn and towards winter, the sun, when it comes out, gets lower and lower, and the quality of light can vary. You can be dazzled very easily, especially on a wet road, and then the sun comes out. So many factors involved in observations and how things can conspire against you. If you consider these things and make sure you respond to them, it can go a long way to helping you out. Another interesting part of the crash statistics was that reckless, careless, or being in a hurry contributed quite highly in the scheme of things to being involved in a collision as well. So your manner of riding is really going to affect your risk levels. Let's be honest, most of us know that anyway. But here's the thing. We're all human. We all make judgments, we all make errors, we make mistakes, we make sound decisions as well. But the more experienced you are, and the more focused you are, and the more proactive you are in doing things well, the lower your risk's going to be. A lot of people seem to think they're born bikers and that training is not needed. and knowledge is not needed. Well, it is, basically, it is. You might be born to control a bike very well, you may be fearless, you may have fantastic balance, but when it comes to the roadcraft of everything, that is generally something that requires a lot more effort. But as I said, we're human and anybody can make a mistake. Anybody can make an error of judgment. So naturally, overtaking, a very high risk area. And we saw that 66% of these fatal and serious collisions happen on rural roads. Well, a lot of those rural roads are national speed limit rural roads, such as this. This is considered a rural road. Now, I recently read a proposal, if you like, or a suggestion that we should start reducing national speed limits on country roads, because people say, you know, we've got 20s in towns, we've got 40s and 50s on these dual carriageways and other A roads, and yet why is it these little country roads are still national speed limit? Quite simply because if people drove according to the conditions and not to the limit, there wouldn't be any issue at all. So yet again, we're involving the reduction of speed limits potentially to sort out a problem. But overtaking, high speed manoeuvre, putting you on the other side of the road, is bound to be inherently dangerous. And guess what? Yet again, not something that's really trained at direct access level, and certainly not at CBT level. Now, I have heard people saying that we shouldn't be training overtaking, this is an emergency service technique and all the rest of it, and people shouldn't overtake because it's dangerous. Well, the fact is, people are going to overtake. There's a need to overtake often. I'm not saying we should be doing every little overtake under the sun, and nor should we be pressurised into doing overtakes, but the fact remains, it's going to happen, people are going to do it, and if they are going to do it, they should be trained to do it properly and well, and their judgment should be sound. And the whole problem with these overtakes that we're getting and resulting in motorcycle collisions is that the judgment isn't sound. Common reasons why it's going wrong, I think, is a lot of bikers, when they're riding out together, when the first guy does an overtake, the second guy follows his mate in front. Well, that's dangerous. I've always said, never follow another motorcycle through, another vehicle through on an overtake. It doesn't matter whether it's a static vehicle or a moving vehicle. You always wait until the overtaking vehicle in front of you has completed the overtake before you commit to the overtake. Now, there's nothing wrong with you popping out for a view while he's out there, but you just don't commit to it. You only go when you've got somewhere to go safely, and that can very often be judging how close you are to a bend or a junction. So one of the cardinal sins, if you like, for me, overtaking on the approach to or across a junction. It's an absolute no-no. And the other problem that we're going to potentially have as well is judging the speed and the distance involved and how long it's going to take you to get back on your own side of the road. So when you start overtaking where there's bends involved, you'd better be sure that you know exactly where your return to the correct side of the road is, and you've allowed for any unseen oncoming vehicle popping around that bend. I mean, for years, always taught, don't overtake on a bend. Well, that's a very general phrase, because you can overtake on a bend, but it's very much dependent on how much vision or lack of that you have. And how quickly you're closing on that bend. And if we go back to earlier on when we were talking about the problems with bends and how people are having problems on bends because they can't assess the bend correctly, how can you hope to overtake correctly if you don't know how to do a bend properly? So the fundamentals of getting that roadcraft correct for your bends is very, very important when it comes into an overtaking situation. You've got to have a damn good view of that road ahead, and you've got to be certain that your machine will do what it needs to do in the time and the distance that you've got available to you. You see, here we are on a national speed limit road doing about 28-30 mile an hour. You can't tell people not to overtake because they're going to, but it's showing the correct degree of restraint and then applying your training and your knowledge to the overtake. I mean, I'd love to sort of scoot past a few of these. It's an absolute given, isn't it? National speed limit road, you know, we've only just got up to just over 35 now, but you can tell it's not on. I could probably sneak in front of the Volkswagen, but it'd be tight behind that large vehicle there, and then suddenly we've got all the mud left on the road by an agricultural vehicle. Sometimes you just have to weigh it up and think, right, is it worth me actually bothering? And in that situation, not really. Nothing wrong with a well executed, well planned overtake in the correct place, but as you can see, not on a junction. So as we said before in the Another Summer of Motorcycle Crashes videos, the main areas of concern, if you like, are going to be junctions, bends and overtaking. By all means, have a look at the crash statistics. You'll see that's not exclusively restricted to those particular manoeuvres, but we can see they feature very, very highly year on year, year on year. Reducing speed limits isn't going to change those factors at all. Only good education, in my opinion, will solve those problems for you to any real degree. I hope the video has been useful to you in some regard. I'm always very appreciative to read your comments and your thoughts. If nothing else, we just need to make sure that training motorcyclists is a priority, and that we teach them more and more and more, so more of you are upskilled, confident and safer, but you still get to enjoy doing what you love, which is riding your bike, but also going home safely after every ride. So until next time, ride safe and take care.